The task force does not forget victims, and we will not stop in our pursuit of justice.
Experts have created a new facial reconstruction of one of the most mysterious victims found along Gilgo Beach as they try to identify another one of the victims of a suspected serial killer. As more focus is on the case and its prime suspect, Rex Heuermann, the DA is hoping someone will recognize them. We're taking a closer look at the investigation as well as connections to the so-called Gilgo Four, all with police officer Kyle Shoberg. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
Today we're asking for the public's help in identifying an individual who has been known as Asian Doe. They were found on Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach in 2011, and despite our best efforts, this person still remains nameless. And by nameless, I mean to us, to members of the task force. This person certainly had a life and loved ones and friends who knew them by their name. And it's important that this victim get their name back, and just as importantly, the people who cared for this individual get answers.
So as you know, we have been focusing on Gilgo Beach, Long Island, these murders. Not just Rex Heuermann, though, the Manhattan architect who's charged with the murders of at least 6 women. He was first charged last year. This was years after the cases went cold. The DA tacking on more charges as the investigation continues. He's currently pled not guilty. But now we're talking about something else. We're talking about someone who may not be directly linked to Heuermann. This is somebody who's been identified as Asian Doe. Now, the remains of this young victim were found on Long Island many years ago, the victim of a deadly beating. And we know that Asian Doe was not the only one. The unidentified remains of Asian Doe were unearthed along with nearly a dozen other victims.
With regard to the initial investigation in this case, the remains of Asian Doe were discovered on April 4th, 2011. They were found, the skeletal remains were found on Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach in New York, I believe found in between, just closest to Megan Waterman. The initial examination revealed the following. The victim was a biological male of Asian descent. The victim was between the ages of 17 and 23. So there, he was a teenager or very young adult when the murder occurred, and he was about 5'6" tall, give or take a couple of inches either way. Unfortunately, this victim suffered a violent death. The cause of death was homicide by blunt force trauma. We know the death occurred during or prior to 2006. And that those remains were on Ocean Beach for at least 5 years before being discovered in 2011. So the actual murder occurred based on the forensic examination of the remains in 2006 or earlier.
Again, this is the Suffolk County DA Ray Tierney that you're hearing from. Asian Doe was one of 10 people whose remains were found along a stretch of Long Island's South Shore. It all started when police started looking for missing sex worker Shannon Gilbert. And they found not only her body, but remains of many others, all in the same area. Now, no one has ever been charged with Gilbert's death. Police have said it was likely an accident. Her family disagrees. But at the time of the discovery in 2011, police released a sketch of Asian Doe. And since then, facial reconstructionists have worked on the case to give a better representation of what this person may have looked like. It's pretty remarkable. Well, Suffolk County DA Ray Tierney also released photos of clothing labels that were found on what Asian Doe was wearing, including a bra. Now, the victim was dressed exclusively in women's clothing, so the DA stressed that the person might have presented to others as a female. A sketch of what Asian Doe might look like with longer hair was also included in the new police flyer. Investigators were also able to use genealogical DNA to learn more about the victim. In fact, District Attorney Tierney says there's actually not a lot of DNA from people of Asian descent available in online databases, so genealogical DNA is obviously a great help in something like this. Scientists are able to determine more about a person's ethnicity, where they grew up, and more from this information. And Tierney says that officials now know that Asian Doe is likely descended from people in southern China, also known as Han Chinese. Investigators believe that Asian Doe had been in the New York City area close to their time of death and was likely working as a sex worker. Tierney hopes that by reaching out directly to the large Asian community in and around New York City, someone might recognize this person, might recognize these updated renderings. Hey, by the way, our plan is to continue to follow Gilgo as it progresses, and we're able to do that. We're able to dedicate the resources to stories like this and continue to cover and analyze them because of the incredible support that not only we get from you guys, but also from our sponsors. And I want to highlight one in particular right now, Morgan & Morgan. So if you're injured, this firm with over 1,000 attorneys may be who you want in your corner because they're America's largest injury law firm. And for a reason, they win a lot. You get a dedicated army that includes a legal team, case investigators, paralegals, customer case specialists. There's no upfront fee. You only pay them if you win. The whole process can be done straight from your smartphone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. Right now, I want to bring in Kyle Shoberg, who is a California sergeant. He's a co-instructor of the Patrol Survivor Tactics Seminar, host of the Shots Fired podcast. Kyle, thanks so much for coming on. Different kind of case we're talking about today. The thing that was remarkable to me, and one of the things I guess I didn't focus on a lot, and you tell me if it's kind of commonplace, to have remains and then have artist renderings or reconstructions made of these renderings. I think that's pretty remarkable to try to identify people that you would not otherwise be able to identify. Is this common?
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, technology in today's day and age has gone so far from back when these bodies were first located. You know, back then it was just maybe a sketch that a sketch artist would put together. Now, I mean, you're talking about all this 3D technology that law enforcement agencies are allowed to do or able to even do to reconstruct what they believe what somebody would look like, not only back then, but as they progress through life. I mean, they can do all of those things. I mean, look, we're talking about genealogy and finding people's DNA, and people are actually getting convicted of serial killings from a long time ago through the use of genealogy online. So I think if you just look at how we're progressing with, you know, DNA, reconstruction, now genealogy, and getting people's DNA online, it's pretty remarkable, and I think it's only going to advance from here.
How likely is it that people would come forward with information, A, in general, generally speaking, but B, for so many years later, would somebody come forward?
Yeah, who knows? You know, I mean, especially the Asian culture might be a little bit different, and especially if this person was not here legally, there's not much documentation on this individual, but they're also going to have to tie Rex to that homicide, right? Just because they have another unidentified body that was found in that particular area where all these other bodies were located, there is still going to have to tie something or some type of evidence to Rex to actually get a conviction.
Well, if they believe that he did it, right? They don't want to go out and specifically, say, explicitly say, yes, he's part of this. We just have to get the evidence to tie him to that. They haven't said that. They said we're going to take each case separate. And I can understand that because unfortunately, while you have a number of deaths attributed to him, that could have just been a location that was, sad to say, I wish I had a better terminology, but a dumping site for a lot of bodies.
Yeah, it very well could have been. I think investigators they obviously have a team, a task force put together to investigate all these. And I think they're obviously going to be looking at that very closely and trying to determine if he's directly linked to these other bodies that have been found in that location. But you know, hopefully somebody does come forward in the Asian community and identifies or recognizes who this person was. But I think it's challenging, and then trying to get people to come forward, you know, depending on their culture. But, you know, who knows? That's up in the air right now.
And we don't even know if the Asian community would know who he is just because this person's Asian. I imagine a difficulty would be if you have an individual, I believe the police, I said this is a Chinese male between 17 and 23, who also dressed up as a female, that could be complicated because people, or not, right? I mean, we're talking about something from years ago. If someone is, and taking the allegation is true that this person was involved in the sex work industry, perhaps somebody would know those kind of specific characteristics about this person. On the other hand, if you're just looking at somebody who, you know, some people saw dressed as a female, some people saw dressed as a male. It kind of opens up the breadth of potential sightings. So I don't know if it's going to make it more complicated or not.
Yeah, well, it is going to make it more complicated. And here's the other thing too that people probably don't take into account is you have this male who knows, he could only come out at night and dress as a female and go do his thing in the evening times. But maybe people close to him, family members, maybe they don't even know that about him, So back then, that obviously wasn't as acceptable as it probably would be today. But so I think that's going to be very challenging. But I think with the use of technology and this 3D imaging that they're able to do, hopefully somebody recognizes them and comes forward. But again, that's up in the air right now.
How do you sort out tips when you have a high-profile case like this, especially a big development like this? How do you sort out legitimate tips from not?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could get hundreds, if not thousands of tips, and that is very daunting. You have to put together a team of people that can weed through all of these tips and try to come up with some that could be credible, but could not. The problem is you have to go through all of the tips, because if you leave one out, that might be a crucial tip in the case. It's very challenging. It's very time consuming. And that's where you have to be diligent with your work. Put together a team of people depending on how many tips you're actually receiving. And you're just going to have to go through all of them and start vetting all of these tips out, see which ones are more credible.
I want to take this back to one final point, and it's kind of generally speaking, not a clear answer to it. When you see blunt force trauma injuries, when you see this level of attack, a beating, does that give you any indication about who might have done this, or is it just is it more difficult to process and understand?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to point you to a particular individual that would have committed this crime, unless you have all these other bodies that have very similar injuries in nature that could point towards, okay, well, they're all very similar in how these people were killed. But as far as blunt force trauma, I mean, that could be as a result of a lot of different things.
By the way, one other thing I want to get back to, if you're dealing with somebody who was beaten to death, they had to have been in some sort of state where you can do a reconstruction, right? I mean, that's pretty remarkable that you're able to use those remains to create a reconstruction, an image of this person. But does that give you any indication about the level of attack?
It just depends. I mean, what kind of remains was this person found in? How long were they there? What type of, how was their body preserved? All of those things. So I think, yeah, depending on the level of attack, how bad of trauma this person was sustained, then yeah, I think that's going to play a factor in how you're going to be able to either come up with a drawing or a sketch or like 3D imaging that they've come up with to try to determine what this person looks like.
Kyle Shoberg, thank you so much for coming on. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can go to YouTube, Shots Fired Podcast, on social media, Instagram. We're on all audio platforms. So yeah, we're a law enforcement based podcast, and we say we're for everybody. So we're just an unbiased law enforcement platform to bridge the gap between community and law enforcement.
There you go. Thank you so much, sir. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.